Hi there, my lovely friends, and welcome to the third installment of A Marriage of Necessity. This book, I'll get the title right this time, and we are starting from chapter 8. So if you wanted to watch the previous two installments, I will put the playlist for it up here, and I will also include it at the end of this video. But this is a standalone book, so you don't have to have read anything of mine before. But please note, it is an MM Arranged Marriage series. So let's begin. This is classic abuser behavior. Duncan raged in his and Merlin's private quarters. Did no one explain that to him? Was there no counselor or someone who might consider that he's terrified something is going to happen to the one person he cares about? Apparently not. Avalon cast a worried eye at the interconnecting wall between the cabin they were in and the cabin next door where Jasper was sleeping. In the absence of any medications on board, the chef had suggested half a glass of wine to someone who had no tolerance for it should be sufficient to relax Jasper enough that he'd have no choice but to sleep. But the glass was still half full on Avalon's bedside cabinet. Jasper had fallen into a deep sleep the moment his head hit the pillow. It was Avalon who was preparing for a long night. They had given up on the idea of going into port. Avalon was hoping if Jasper had magical difficulties while he slept, they might be easier to contain at sea. From the little he told me, Jasper has been made to believe all this time that his magic wasn't actually a part of him. Luigi even believed he was possessed, for goodness sake. I mean, how can you imagine how Jasper must have felt growing up when he was treated so differently from his siblings? Avalon was angry about that. He hadn't had a lot to do with Queen Fiona over the years. It was his parents who'd formed the friendship with his husband's parents. But the idea that any child would grow up thinking something was wrong with him. It's a tactic I've heard about before. Merlin had worked at the World Council's Magical University for a time. Not so much in royal households, obviously, but in rare situations, usually where the mother has played across the fence and a magical child is born, the child is made to feel there is something wrong with them, something other, as opposed to their magic being a normal part of their genetics. Unfortunately, I didn't handle the questioning on that side of things very well, Avalon said, remembering Jasper's anger. He stated very clearly that the World Council endorsed his birth record that clearly states the King and Queen of Lowenthorpe are his natural parents. There has never been any suggestion otherwise. I'm not even sure if I should bring it up with my father. The king would have told you if he suspected anything like that, Duncan said firmly. Our immediate problem is, what are we going to do with your husband? Is he safe to have on the ship? As safe as you or me, Avalon snapped. So he has magic. So what? I can think of situations where something like that could be useful. Duncan wasn't being disrespectful to Jasper, Merlin said quietly. We fully support your marriage, you know that. But it is a concern if Jasper doesn't believe his magic is an inherent part of him. I mean, for him, from what you described, performing magic appears to be as natural as breathing for him. It's no wonder, when you factor in the trauma he's been through, how unruly his magic might be. Now you're speaking as though his magic is an extension of him rather than a part of him, Avalon teased. People consciously choose to show or control their anger. Jasper's concern seems to be that he can't control his magic unless he's awake. And he's performed a feat I never believed possible, staying awake a full 4 days, Duncan grumbled. And Avalon knew, in his own way, that Duncan did worry about the new consort. Is there any chance, now Jasper knows that we know about his magic and the threat to his mother, that he might tell us who we're seeking so we can get after them? Is it possible Queen Fiona can go on a trip to see Jeanne, for example? Merlin suggested. If we apprised your father of what was going on... I don't think Jasper's mother has left the castle since her husband died. Avalon stroked his chin. It would be the best idea, of course. If Jasper believes his mother is safe and away from any possible threats in Lowenthorpe, then he might be more willing to give us a clue as to who hurt him. You think we're looking for an organisation or family as opposed to a single person? Duncan asked. Avalon nodded. Jasper mentioned his magic being bound in some way. I don't know how something like that could have happened, but the chances of a single person being able to do that... Actually, a binding spell could be done with magical crystals, Merlin said. It's rarely done, highly frowned upon, but it can be done, and relatively easily too. How do the boffins you used to work for even know that's possible? Duncan looked at his partner in shock. Do they actually test these things on real people? The number of people alive today who have workable magic beyond lighting a cigarette or something like that is less than 100 the world over. There are 3 tribes who actively breed magical lines amongst their people, but they don't take partners outside of their established tribe. There is some pirate law that suggests they have magic, although no one outside of a pirate ship ever speaks of it. That's more the stuff of myths and legends, all of which suggests that Queen Fiona did have a dalliance, no matter how brief, outside of her marriage to the king, Duncan frowned. That could make finding out information difficult. Why would it matter? Avalon couldn't see why knowing who Jasper's parents were had any bearing on the current day, even if it was true and Jasper's mother had been frivolous with her vows. But then, he reasoned, although he kept it quiet, discussing the lineage of royals was not a topic of conversation that was brought up unless there were life-threatening reasons to do so. What if the person who took your husband is someone related to a possible third person who could, You can't even say it, and I can't blame you, Avalon sighed. That is not something that is ever discussed in polite society. I do know for a fact that if my father knew about this, he would have told me. He could have just been trying to get you married off, determined to get that part of your life sorted, with the idea that once you'd invoked the piss-off clause, or Jasper did, then you'd be more open to marrying someone else. Merlin spoke quietly, almost hesitantly, for good reason. Avalon couldn't take offence. The joke is on good old Dad then, because both Jasper and I revoked our right to invoke the piss-off clause. Our marriage stands regardless. Isn't that only if the two of you are intimate in some way? Duncan looked to his own husband for verification. I thought the laws were that a marriage could dissolve if the pair hadn't been intimate, and as you're never likely to do that... Never say never, Duncan, Avalon warned. He wasn't ready to explain to his closest friends the feelings Jasper raised inside of him, but he wasn't prepared to completely discard the idea of being intimate with the enigmatic man at some point in the future. The sheer courage Jasper showed, revealing his injury and his magic likes me, which was something said when Jasper was still viewing his magic as something apart from him, not an integral part of who he was. The laws around dissolving a marriage and how that can't happen if a couple has been intimate only relates to people who went into a marriage with the piss off clause included, Merlin explained. What Jasper and our errant prince have done is effectively tied themselves together for life with no chance of a divorce. A couple may separate. The World Council doesn't insist that married people share the same abode, but our prince will be responsible for Jasper for life. And sir, I have to say that worries me just slightly. Speak freely. Avalon knew his friend wasn't prone to dramatics or rash statements. I'd rather hear your concerns while my husband is sleeping than have something occur none of us were prepared for. Is there something in this situation I'm missing? It has to do with the fact that you are responsible for Jasper's behavior. Merlin reached over, taking his husband's hand. When Duncan runs off, putting himself in dangerous situations, then no one bats an eyelid or expects me to stop him. There aren't any ramifications on me if he does something silly. I'm not sure you're being complimentary, Duncan grinned, but that's true. As the higher ranking of the two of us, which has no relevance to our marriage behind closed doors, Merlin reminded him. But sire, you are a prince of the realm. If the consort does anything untoward, if his magic does cause an issue or damage or something similar, whether it be this week or in 10 years' time, you will be held accountable and responsible as you are the higher ranking person in your marriage. Which is why I need your help to show Jasper that his magic isn't anything that needs to be shut away, is not something he should feel ashamed of, and indeed is something that is just a natural part of who he is, regardless of how he came to have that magic in the first place. You still think his mother did something, or something was done to her? At this point, what I think is irrelevant, Avalon reminded Duncan. What is more important is that Jasper learns he can trust us, and that his magic isn't something that we're going to treat as a condition that he needs to hide. Is that a good idea? Merlin asked. Not everyone is au fait with magic. Indeed, because of the law around pirates, many people assume that if a society family member has magic, it's because they've been closely associating with pirates somewhere in their family tree. That business with Luigi bothers me, Duncan said. Why would Queen Fiona not just tell her eldest son that Jasper wasn't possessed by a demon? I mean, that's pushing the laws of steam and magic just a bit far, don't you think? Why call in the World Council and subject Jasper to that sort of scrutiny? That's a good point. Avalon thought about it. He had many dealings with different departments at the World Council, but never anything magic related. Merlin, are there special laws or different laws pertaining to magic users? Restrictions on people who exhibit signs of magical ability or anything like that? Merlin shook his head. The Magical University is actively seeking ways to enhance magical abilities in people who are born with it. There are pills, potions, and crystals at varying price points that people can use to enhance any ability they might have. By enhance, I mean that if someone can light a cigarette with their finger, then the flame might be more consistent or perhaps a different color to make it showier for a society person. But one thing all studies have shown over the last century or more is that a person's skills with magic are naturally restricted to the abilities they were born with. They can't light a cigarette 1 minute and command the waves the next. That's just not possible. But with regards to restrictions on people with any magical ability, no, there's no legal or societal constraint on that. That could be because most of the people who might have a smidgen of magical ability at all are those same people who tend to live outside of the societal rankings in place in most countries. Who did it? Who it? The pirates, the crystal tribes, and those people in the tribes that live inland from Lowenthorpe. They are all isolated peoples who appeared to reject the way most societies are ruled under the World Council, Duncan said. And he made a good point. All right, so we know. Avalon broke off, thinking he heard a noise, but it wasn't coming from the cabin next door. It was someone knocking on the stateroom door. Enter, he called out. Sire. The door opened and Jose, one of the deckhands, poked his head around it. There seems to be something in the water. A couple of the crew are spooked. Would you come and look at it? What sort of something are we talking about? Avalon got to his feet and headed for the door. Duncan and Merlin did the same. Is it a vessel of some kind? A creature? A large piece of debris floating on the surface? It's not easy to tell, sire, Jose said. I really think you need to see it for yourself. Oops, where are we? There we go. Chapter 9. Jasper was aware that he was dreaming. He'd always had that ability and assumed it was just another way his magical side made itself more aware. He didn't even realize that other people didn't have the same dual awareness until he talked to his mother about it when he was young. Her quiet shake of her head and a gentle finger over his lips let him know that was another thing he shouldn't mention to others. Unfortunately, that awareness didn't stop him from reliving the horrors of his incident night after night. It had been almost 2 months now since he'd first been taken, and there hadn't been a night when he'd slept when he hadn't found himself in the cave. The long dark shadows, the smell of smoke and herbs in the air that covered him like a blanket he couldn't get free of. And those faces. As soon as he became aware he was dreaming, Jasper saw the mountain area where the caves were, over in the distance from where he was apparently standing. You'd think, after 4 days of being awake and having that sip of wine, that my brain would have taken me to somewhere different just for a change of scenery. Maybe I should have stayed awake long enough to drink the whole glass. Total oblivion must be fun for those who can achieve it. Folding his legs, Jasper sat down on the dusty yellow ground, not keen on going anywhere. It wouldn't change anything, him sitting down. Jasper knew he'd end up in that cave sooner or later. He could see the flicker of the huge fire from where he was sitting and imagined the distinct spice blend in the air as he breathed. But for now, he was conscious of his body's need to heal. Nightmares jolted him awake, and Jasper was determined to stay asleep as long as physically possible. After staying awake for so long, there was a sense of inevitability and a weird form of comfort in knowing his dream space hadn't changed when his life had been upended in such an unusual way. Closing his eyes, his dream state restored his stolen eye every time he slept. Jasper consciously focused on those changes. There was his new husband, the ship, the crew, and the ever-changing sea that was such a different visage to the dusty landscape of his dreamscape. Jasper had never been drawn to the water. As a child, he had been fascinated by it, but then he'd been warned away from the sea he could barely see from his bedroom window, and that urge to explore it disappeared over time. Jasper could appreciate the irony, given how his mother was so desperate to see him married off, that she actively invited his marriage contract with a man who, if Princess Felicity was to be believed, spent more than half his life on his ship. If I ever fell overboard, I couldn't even swim to save myself. Time passed differently in the dream realm. Jasper distracted himself and his increasing awareness of the cave by imagining what it would be like to be completely surrounded by water. All of his body, even his head. He was aware that humans couldn't breathe underwater. Personally, he'd never been in water deeper than it took to bathe. But Jasper had spent so much of his life engrossed in books, and dreams were supposed to be where the impossible became possible. All those incredible creatures. Jasper wrapped his arms around his legs, resting his chin on his knees, his eyes still closed. That cave wasn't going anywhere. But in his head, Jasper thought about the greens and blues, the murky depths of the water that surrounded Avalon's ship. It would be deep enough to house every creature I've ever read about. Brilliant colors and slivers of silver filled Jasper's mind as he imagined the illustrations of the creatures he'd only read about. He could see the long sleep shapes of sharks with sharp teeth, and yet the pictures Jasper had always seen showed an uncanny intelligence in those eyes. Whales were larger still, and yet had that same knowing look in the illustrations artists had made of them. Then there were the beings with tentacles. Jasper was always fascinated by those. Their different colors, so bright in what was usually depicted as murky water. He often wondered if the creatures were lit up in some way through their biology, or if it was a reaction of their skin against the salt in the sea. Stingrays were another creature that captured Jasper's imagination. They appeared to move in such graceful ways, at least in Jasper's imagination. It was almost as if they were flying through the water. Indeed, anecdotal accounts he'd read about the creatures were as wide as Jasper was tall, suggested they were an aloof creature that didn't come close when divers. Divers? How can that be? It had to be magic, Jasper decided. How else could men who breathe the air on land not want to instantly choke on the water with their faces submerged? So many incredible creatures. Would they accept a being like me? It's as if every sea creature from miles around is being drawn to the ship, Merlin said in a hushed whisper. Avalon appreciated the caution. It was late. Most of the crew were sleeping. But Jose and Hugo, who were holding aloft the lamps as of Avalon had ordered, looked decidedly uncomfortable leaning over the ship's railings, with so many creatures swimming below. As soon as Avalon had seen the extent of the visitation, he'd ordered the ship to stop and drop anchor as well. He didn't want to hit anything without knowing what had caused the creatures to come so close. "Has this got something to do with the consort?" Duncan asked bluntly. "Is he some form of siren? One who calls to the creatures of the sea and lures men to their death? Well, if he is, he clearly wouldn't know about it. He's never been out on a ship before. Besides, I'm not hearing any siren songs the legends speak of. Rather than be alarmed, Avalon found himself fascinated. In all his time spent on the waves, he'd seen many things. But to see the waters literally churning with life, completely surrounding the ship, was something he doubted he'd ever see again. I'm more concerned about whether or not they mean us any harm. Merlin seemed just as intrigued, although a lot more cautious. Admittedly, I'm not seeing any creature at the moment that could cause the ship any damage, but if there's some sort of call going out... His tone rose at the end, clearly asking the question, looking at Avalon expectantly. This has to be a coincidence. Although Avalon didn't believe that was the case, and clearly neither did Duncan or Merlin. Jasper's been asleep for hours. This phenomenon has only just arrived. If your consort is calling the creatures in some way, or if they are drawn to his magic, then that could give us a clue as to what happened to him and his true heritage. Duncan muttered. Avalon glared at his friend. Are you suggesting my husband's father was a pirate and this is pirate magic? That type of magic is not even a fact. It's folklore and tales told in the taverns at night at most. This situation is highly irregular. Duncan could be so stubborn. You can't tell me that on the one night out at sea, when your husband finally gets to sleep, that it's a coincidence that we've attracted an entourage of sea creatures. Sire, Jose called out. Sire, should we prepare the cannons? There are larger beings coming, big enough to scuttle the ship. Look. Following the direction of Jose's outstretched arm, Avalon peered through the darkness. It wasn't easy. The waves splashing against the side of the ship were louder due to the disturbance caused by the creatures around them, and seeing beyond the swirls of the water was difficult. For a moment, Avalon couldn't see anything unusual, but then he caught the flash of a large white underbelly, and then another and another. Whales, Merlin said, keeping his voice low. Sire, I'm not saying he's responsible, but I think you might have to wake your husband up. This area of the sea is getting a little too crowded to be safe for any of us. Jasper needs his sleep, Avalon insisted. You said so yourself. No one is hurt. The creatures aren't attacking the ship. Even the whales appear to be moving slowly, and they're not heading for us directly. It's as though they just want to be in the vicinity of the ship. Man overboard! Man overboard! Another member of the crew yelled from the other side of the ship. Crossing the planks at a sprint, Avalon peered into the murky water. Hold up your lamps. Boost their brightness. You there, who fell? How? I can't see anyone splashing around. I saw a person. The man's face was white under the glow of the lanterns. Swimming with the creatures. Not breathing or anything. He was completely submerged in the water. Who? Avalon felt a shaft of fear stab him in the chest. Was it a crew member? One of the guards? Was it anyone you recognize? Duncan, quickly, do a check on all the crew. I swear on my mother's grave, I know what I saw. The man looked petrified. I swear it was the consort. It took a moment for Avalon to connect the dots. The consort? Then he clicked. My husband, you mean? You saw him swimming with the creatures? Damn it, why didn't you dive over and save him? I'm sure you can swim, but I know he can't. Damn it, show me where you last saw him. Avalon started stripping off his coat. He waved at me as he went past. The man sunk to his knees. He didn't look like a man that needed saving. He looked like... All the crew and guards are accounted for. Duncan materialized at his side, slightly out of breath. The only room I didn't go into was yours, where Jasper is supposed to be sleeping. Watch the sea for any sign of human life. Post someone with lamps front and aft and both sides too. The moment you see anyone, not anything, but anyone, then call me. We could lower the longboats, Merlin suggested. We might be able to see better from there. Let me check my cabin first. Patting Merlin's arm, Avalon ran across the deck and down the small hallway to his suite. Tapping lightly on the door, Avalon opened it, moving inside and closing it behind him. The lamps cast a soft glow in his sitting room, and with the door to his sleeping chamber ajar, Avalon could already see the shape of his husband, still on the bed, the covers Avalon had covered him with, moving gently with every breath. Feeling as though he was intruding, even though it was his own space, Avalon moved quietly across the room and into his bedroom until he was standing by the bed. Jasper wasn't wearing his patch. That was resting on the bedside cabinet. In sleep, his features relaxed. There was something ethereal about his husband. Avalon felt a stir under his ribs and then another lower down and shook himself firmly. Jasper, Avalon called softly. Jasper, are you dreaming about sea creatures by any chance? Only I think they've come to visit you. Huh? What was that? Jasper rolled and stretched, and that didn't do Avalon any favors. I was having a lovely dream, the first I've had since... As if suddenly realizing where he was, Jasper shook himself, bolting upright and reaching for his eye patch. I've never seen sea creatures outside of books before. Are you telling me you can see some in the water now? One of the crew swore on his mother's life that he saw you in the water swimming with them, Avalon teased. It might do him good to see you standing on the deck completely dry, if you don't mind. He claims he saw me? Flinging back the covers, Jasper scrambled off the bed. How is that possible? You mean he thought I was in the water? It caused quite a stir, although most of the guards and crew have turned in for the evening. Avalon held out his arm. I can't even swim, Jasper confided as his hand slipped easily around the bend of Avalon's elbow. I mean, I was dreaming. I was swimming. My dreamscape's pretty dusty as a rule, but I was only dreaming. You don't think... Perhaps the crewman concerned had too many wines with the supper, Avalon suggested, although he wasn't sure himself. Now you're awake, let's go and see if the creatures that decided to visit the ship are still there, or if they'd disappeared now that you're awake. Chapter 10. It took all of Jasper's control to contain his delight, keeping his behavior within the bounds of what was publicly acceptable for a crown prince consort. Peering over the deck railing, it was as if his dreams had come to life. Sea creatures of every shape, size, and color moved serenely through the sea. None of them hit the ship's side, or even seemed to want to. No, they were just there, going about their business next to the ship. Does this happen very often? Jasper didn't even try and hide his smile from his husband. He wasn't sure how long he'd slept, but simply seeing his dream come to life in such a beautiful way, that was enough to fuel any tired soul. I can honestly say I've never experienced anything like it before. Jasper was conscious of Avalon watching him, but the scene in the sea below the railing kept drawing his eye. Oh, look, a stingray. I remember one of them from the book I read. He pointed over the side eagerly. They usually live and swim along the seabed. How incredible to see one so close to the surface. And see there, the thing with the squishy tentacles? It's like he's trying to tickle the stingray and get his attention. Jasper laughed out loud. So many different creatures, and none of them are harming each other at all. There are whales too. Avalon pointed to a spot beyond the glow of the lamps. They don't usually come close to the ships. It's almost as though they know their bulk could hurt us, or that our ship's design could damage them. Look at the size of them. Jasper covered his mouth with his hand, worried he'd look like a child with his mouth wide open. No wonder you love traveling the sea so much, to share this space with all these amazing creatures. It's humbling, don't you think? There was a loud rumbling noise, as if something was being pulled along by chains. Jasper was just about to ask what it was when a man called out, "Your Highness, we've opened the cannon portals, waiting on your command." Cannons? The ship had cannons? Jasper was sure his shock was showing, but it wasn't the happy kind he'd felt seeing the wonders of the sea. All large seafaring ships have cannons, my husband. Avalon's smile was one a man might give a child. Some of the crew are just concerned that the whales are swimming so close to us and want to be prepared. You're going to shoot them? Unable to believe his ears, Jasper did the only thing he could think of in his desperation. The creatures meant no harm. His magic told him that. But the man who'd called out didn't have the same kindly disposition. He tugged off his boots and shrugged off his jacket off his shoulders, dropping it on the deck. I'm damn sure it's against World Council laws to shoot at a Crown Prince consort. Make sure they don't. Leaping up onto the railing, Jasper trusted in his magic and plunged over the side. Avalon's no ringing in his ears. The water was cold enough to take Jasper's breath away, a lot colder than he'd expected it to be. Hitting the surface of it with flailing limbs, Jasper realized how hard it was too, hitting the sea with such a force. That's going to leave me some bruises in multiple places. He sank. Jasper knew he would. But he had to hold on to the idea that if he was in the water, then no one on the ship would fire into it. Letting his limbs relax, Jasper's arms and legs brushed against the sea creatures as they swam close, probably wondering what he was doing. The sea was not a natural element for non-swimming humans. I should breathe. Even as he thought it, Jasper's magic kicked in, making that possible, clearly more concerned with his survival than he was. Jasper was focused on the sensation of falling. The water was incredibly deep, but there was so much more. It was incredible, the freedom and the intense silence the water offered him. Is this why my mother warned me away? Did she know how seductive this feeling might be for me? It would be so easy to just stay here. In a lot of ways, Jasper knew that would be for the best. His mother would grieve, but she'd faced grief and moved past it before. Felicity and Luigi would probably hold a private party, outside of their mother's hearing, of course, but they would be pleased all the same. Jasper always knew how weird they believed him to be. "What about your new husband?" Jasper's magic was prodding him, so Jasper dutifully thought about the man he'd only known a handful of days, the man who had been nothing but kind to him. "My passing might be the kindest gift I could offer him." Fool. A large fish, bigger than Jasper's torso, brushed past him, jabbing him with a fin. "He has already lost one he was betrothed to. Would you condemn him to mourn a husband now just because you're too tired to keep going?" That made Jasper pause, and he sat up, surrounded completely by the water and the various creatures who were watching him curiously. "I can't do that to him. Excuse me for being here, but I'm trying to save the whales and the rest of you from someone scared in the crew." He projected mentally because he knew fish couldn't speak. "How do I get to the whales?" "Move your arms and legs. Pull yourself through the water." It wasn't words that came, more impressions of movements that Jasper clumsily tried to emulate. He had the feeling he was going to be laughed at, but he was moving, and one could hope, in the right direction. "Swing out the longboat," Avalon roared the moment he saw Jasper going over the side. "Move it, now. I want to be in that boat in the next 3 clicks." He wasn't foolish enough to dive into the waves after his husband, that didn't mean he wasn't going after him. "Your Highness," Merlin had tears in his eyes as he grabbed at Avalon's arm, "there is no point in going after him. You saw how quickly he fell. Jasper was likely stunned by the force of hitting the water. He should have surfaced by now, but he hasn't. Sire, you must accept he's gone." "That's ridiculous." Avalon's heart had literally stopped the moment Jasper disappeared, but he could see the creatures milling around a certain spot about 4 foot away from the ship's side. "Jasper has magic. He won't be dead." "I'm not strictly sure what he thinks he's doing down there," he thought as he peered over the side again. The creatures were still gently swirling around. "He's going to need help getting back onto the ship." "Sire, no." Now Duncan was standing in front of him, hands loosely by his side as if ready to pin Avalon to the deck. "You're the crown prince and only heir of Sejan. You employ us to stop you from doing something stupid, and going after Jasper is the silliest thing you could ever do." He leaned in, lowering his voice. "Don't you realize Jasper's giving you an out from this marriage? Did you ever consider that maybe he went overboard knowing he can't swim to save you from a life of whispered asides and pointed looks?" He nodded over Avalon's shoulder, and Avalon turned, seeing 3 of his guards in a huddle whispering about something. It didn't take any imagination to know Jasper was the topic of conversation. As soon as they saw Avalon had noticed them, they quickly straightened, standing to attention. Turning back to Duncan, Avalon poked his friend's chest. "Would you still be standing on this deck if it was Merlin in that water?" "You know I wouldn't," Duncan glared. "Merlin and I have a relationship of deep respect and understanding. You know how much he means to me, but you barely know Jasper. You never wanted to marry in the first place, and now with this magic business—" "If you have an issue with my husband, I suggest you sort it out before I get back on board," Avalon said, his tone as menacing as he could make it. "Jasper can feel what people think about him, their true feelings, not the masks they show him when they interact with him. How do I know Jasper didn't go overboard because he could feel how disliked he was by you and this crew?" Duncan's frown deepened. "I wasn't thinking anything like that. I can't speak for the rest of the crew, but Jasper went into the water because he thought you were going to order the whales to be shot. But now he's gone and he hasn't surfaced. I lost someone dear to me once, and there was nothing I could do about it at the time because I wasn't there. But this is different. I am here. And if you think I'm going to stand around and debate concepts that have no bearing on Your Highness, Merlin called out from where he was still watching over the rail. The creatures are on the move, out towards where the whales are, and they seem, it's as if they have some sort of light source with them. I knew it. You tried to tell me he was dead. Not this time, my friend. Not this time. Avalon's grin split his face. Close those cannon covers and lock them, he ordered loudly. I want lights on every rope and along the railings. Light this ship up so it can be seen from the mainland. I hardly want to lose the ship once I find my husband, now do I? He added in a lower voice to his staunch-looking friend. I'm coming too. Duncan shook his head, likely at Merlin, who would object. If you need someone to use the oars to hold this boat steady while you drag your husband's body on board. You can bring extra lamps. Avalon sprinted to where the longboat was suspended over the ship's railings. Climbing on board, he barely waited for Duncan before he gave the signal for the boat to be lowered. The longboat wasn't big, barely a man and a half wide, and with seating for only 4 men. The narrow width made it possible for 1 man or 2 to use the oars on both sides rather than the wider, bulkier models many other ships used that required 2 men sitting side by side to propel it. Avalon had maneuvered a longboat on his own many times and grabbed the oars confidently now. As Merlin had said, the swimming entourage had moved away from the ship, and peering through the light thrown by the lamps, Avalon could make out the faint glow of an elongated shape moving through the water at speed. As Merlin had indicated, he was heading straight for where the whales were still swimming around in circles, likely in the deeper part of the channel from where the ship was anchored. You're acting like a madman, do you know that? Duncan hissed angrily as he worked a second pair of oars. Jasper Fire's instincts in me, I thought, long dead. Avalon's shoulders burned as he moved his oars to keep pace with Duncan's. I am not going to let him or those feelings go without a fight. People were already going to shun him because of his eye patch. When they hear about the magic and the stunt with the whales... Duncan's scoff was easily heard over the splash of the oars. You've spent decades building up a solid reputation. Then isn't it about time that reputation stood for something? Avalon puffed. Slow up. We're getting close. I don't want to hit anything. He thought he heard Duncan mutter something about wanting to hit him, but Avalon ignored it. A huge whale's body slid up and over, its wet skin glistening under the light of Avalon's boat. I am trusting you, Jasper. Don't let me down. Avalon swallowed the lump in his throat as he registered just how big those majestic creatures were. Still submerged in the water, Jasper opened his psyche, sensing the emotions and feelings of the creatures around them. They were curious, and clearly they didn't think a lot of his abilities to move through the water, but they brushed against him, guiding him, nudging him along, all working together even as they got close to where the hulking whales were slowly circling the ship. They won't hurt me. Jasper knew that as surely as he knew his own name. Seeing the majestic creatures in their element, Jasper felt small, insignificant, but he also felt incredibly blessed. One of the larger whales looked in his direction, and yes, Jasper knew he'd been right. He could see the intelligence, like an ageless wisdom, shining from that bright black eye. Images flooded his mind, men on ships, men walking the land, ships sinking, and the destruction that devastation caused to the peace of the sea. More importantly, in Jasper's opinion, the deep sadness the whales felt as a collective felt at the loss of a human life. All life. In that moment, Jasper felt a part of something bigger. When he closed his eye, he could see the threads of the energies humming around him. But as fast as he felt it, he felt other energies too. My husband came after me, he sent to the giant creature. It's time for me to go. The huge whale nodded, and Jasper felt the energies of goodbye as they slowly melted away in the dark water. Jasper wasn't sure if it was tears or salt water that coated his face as he finally broke free of the water's surface, but he knew he'd been incredibly blessed with his encounters. Jasper, thank the goddess. Here, take my hand. Avalon's hand waved in front of him, and Jasper took it, kicking his legs to propel him closer to the narrowboat his husband was in. Avalon's hand was warm, and so was the man's chest as he was pulled out of the water and held close. His husband was shaking, Jasper realized. Buoyed by his encounter with the whales, Jasper looked across at Duncan, who was glowering as he flexed his muscles, rowing them back to the ship. That man was wrestling with demons of his own, and Jasper swallowed the words he was going to say, focusing on Avalon's warmth instead. I am so glad you're all right, Avalon whispered in his ear, and Jasper could feel how much he meant it. Oops, I went to do that. There you go, my friends. Not quite an hour, but we did get 3 chapters in, so that was pretty good. And if you're wanting to continue to listen to this story, I shall do another episode of it next week. In the meantime, remember, if you're an author looking for writer's advice, I do that on Mondays and Thursdays. And and I'll remember to put the playlist up here if you want to watch listen to the first 2 sessions. Let's get it right this time. For the first 2 sessions, I called it A Marriage of Convenience. How bad is it? I couldn't remember the name of my own book. But this is A Marriage of Necessity. And the first 2 sessions for that have already been done. In the meantime, have an awesome weekend. Please, be kind, be happy, and I will see you next time. Bye.